Not all that long ago, just talking about going to therapy was stigmatized to the point that no one ever wanted to talk about it. It was assumed that if you were going to therapy, you were completely mentally unhinged. Thanks to many waves of mental health initiatives over the years, therapy is now viewed as something that basically anyone could benefit from. And it goes without saying that if you're someone like me who's had quite an extensive mental health journey, therapy is definitely beneficial. So in this video, I'm going to talk about different types of therapy I've tried and tell you a little bit about my experience. Hey, it's Vanessa Raquel here. I run a vlog about life advice and stories from the perspective of a queer woman of color, which is me. Please remember to show your support by liking and subscribing. So the types of therapy I'm going to be talking about are one-on-one talk therapy, group therapy, one-on-one CBT therapy, and online therapy. So my journey with therapy started at school, where I went to McMaster University, and all students at McMaster have access to a wellness center. This wellness center had a variety of programs and therapists on site at all times, and it was actually my first time ever going to therapy when I walked in one fateful day several years ago. It was after one of the most traumatic weekends I've ever had in my life. I had basically confronted my abuser and had called the police for the first time after being silent for a decade. So you can imagine going through all that while trying to get through my coursework was extremely challenging. More or less immediately after telling my story about what was going on, I was put into a weekly therapy counselor who specifically focused on sexual abuse and sexual trauma. I'm not sure if every school has a service like this, but I was grateful that Mac had one. This also allowed for the cadence to be on a weekly basis instead of bi-weekly or once a month like a lot of people have access to. And because I was already paying for the wellness service, it was free of charge. So I did this for about 4 months. And what this looked like is I would go into a room that was, really quiet and relaxing with kind of nice lighting. I would always see the same counselor every week, and she was one of the kindest women I've ever met in my entire life. Very quiet and much more reserved in comparison to me, who never stops talking. So basically, I would just talk about things that I'd gone through, things I was struggling with, and things that were on my mind. She would sometimes stop me to ask questions, but more often than not, she just let me say everything I needed to say. One of the biggest benefits of therapy is that you can say absolutely anything, and it's A, in confidence, and B, there's no one you're talking about judging you or that you have to worry about their opinions, which means you can be brutally and harshly honest about whatever it is you're going through. She would occasionally give me tools of how to address certain things. For instance, I was really struggling with some triggers, so she gave me some worksheets on how to manage those. From memory, I would say 9 times out of 10, it was really just a conversation. The way I thought about it sometimes was that there was so much going on in my life that I really needed to confront and deal with, but it was equally so exhausting and mentally draining that it was impossible to think about 24/7. So I really thought about it and segmented it in my mind as once a week, a designated spot that I would think about it, put time towards it, and work on healing. So at around the 4-month mark of doing this weekly therapy, I was feeling really good, and I had progressed a lot. I was definitely still fragile, but I was in a much better place, and we had decided to maybe switch to around bi-weekly sessions. Unfortunately, the universe had other plans, and my father passed away right at that time, which really set me several steps back in my healing process. So it was around this time that I started to try group therapy. This was another weekly session, and I think it ran for around 2 to 3 months. What was great about this was it was another topical segmented type of therapy in that all the women who participated were specifically survivors of sexual abuse. So that meant that the topics every week were something specific that we could focus on together, and in general was something we were all likely to be going through. Now, obviously, I'm more of an extrovert, so I don't really find the sharing in front of other people to be that challenging. And oftentimes, hearing other people's stories can help you realize things you didn't even realize about yourself and how they compare. So overall, I would say that group therapy or support groups can really just help you feel that you are not alone. So next, I want to talk about my experience with CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, while all therapy can be a little bit intense at times, I found this one to be particularly intense. These sessions were often an hour and a half, if not longer, and I was doing them more on a bi-weekly basis. So the reason that I would say that these ones were more intense is that in addition to the standard talk therapy that one would do, this one also included a variety of exercises. So sometimes that would be things like breathing exercises, which weren't necessarily high on the intensity scale, but sometimes they would include things like tapping, Now, as an engineer and a non-religious person, I find that I am super tied up in fact-based, science-based therapy in general. So things that are religious, spiritual, or rely more on having faith that something's gonna work, even if there's no data behind it, those things often don't work for me. And I'm not sure where tapping falls into that, but essentially tapping was closing your eyes and repeating really intense statements about hardcore things you thought and believed. And then you would tap different parts of your body to kind of like rewire your neural networks. I just know that regardless of the neuropathway part, just the statements that were said during tapping made them like another level of intensity. Basically, imagine if in an hour-and-a-half session you've said like a couple things or had a few revelations. Your therapist will take those exact things and have you repeat them so that you're really like embracing and absorbing and thinking about that exact thing. So that's why I put the intensity at just another magnitude. And then lastly, something I've tried more recently, especially during COVID, is online therapy. And specifically, it was using BetterHelp. I've seen a lot of YouTubers and people recommend this or be sponsored by it, and it's basically just an app where you're able to have consistent sessions with therapists or to have urgent conversations with them live. I never really used the live service, but I did find just having, again, that consistent basis was really helpful for me. I would also say in general, it was way more towards the talk therapy than CBT or anything like that. It was nice to have the option to either do a video call or a phone call, and of course the benefit is that you don't have to commute and you can just stay at home. I would say though, it is a little bit pricey depending on what your budget is. I'd also recommend to double check your insurance policies to see whether or not BetterHelp is covered.
I'm realizing in editing that I didn't actually talk about what I think about BetterHelp. I would say overall it was a great service, and it's specifically good if you kind of run out of options and don't really have access to standard healthcare in your area. But that overall I did feel slightly less connected with my therapist, just not seeing them. So I probably recommend doing the video calls instead of phone calls if that connection with your therapist is important to you.
So everything I've talked about thus far has been a formal type of therapy. However, I've always really relied on informal types of therapy as well. Specifically for me, the catharsis of being able to talk openly about things I've been through in a public setting. I find that this helps me lean away from hiding and being embarrassed about things that I've been through, but instead finding a way of owning or embracing these things so that I can help others going through similar things that I've been through. And overall, I definitely wouldn't call it therapy, but I do find it a form of catharsis. And secondly would be journaling. So I have loads of journals back here, and I've definitely shown my bullet journal a couple times on this channel. And I'm actually gonna make a whole video about journaling as a form of therapy. So with that, I'd like to leave you on a message just about normalizing therapy. I truly think so many people can benefit from it regardless of what you've been through, so leave a note in the comment below that you agree that therapy is normal. As a reminder, my name is Vanessa Raquel, and I really appreciate your support on my vlog of life advice and stories from the perspective of a queer woman of color, which is me. I can't say woman, apparently. Have a good one, bye!